You're listening to Woodland Walks, a podcast from the Woodland Trust, presented by Adam Shaw. We protect woods and plant trees, for wildlife, for people.
Well, I'm leaving London on what must be one of the longest train journeys in the UK. It is just over 12 hours, and I'm starting here at Euston, and I'm going to Loch Arkaig on the northwestern tip of Scotland. Right, I'm running up and down the platform. The carriages aren't in alphabetical order, and I've got all very confused. Excuse me. Right, okay. Right, I think I'm in the right place. I think I'm there. Well, it's not quite like the Orient Express. A bit of a budget version, I think, but we're off on quite an adventure. The train journey is going to take me through some weird and wonderful places. So it splits at Crewe, we're then off to Edinburgh, and then we're into a very different world. I have to apologise already, my pronunciation deserts me, but they sound wonderful. Dalmor, Ardlur, the Bridge of Orcai, which sounds like it should be a book in Harry Potter series, Tulloch, and I get off at Speen Bridge. One stop before the very end of the line at Fort William, and I'm terrified because if I don't wake up in time in the morning, I will miss my stop. 12 hours to go. Just going to look out the window. Now, Loch Arkaig is quite a remote place, and as a result, it should have lots of really unusual wildlife, some important wildlife, things like breeding osprey, white-tailed sea eagles, golden eagles, crested tits, as well as woodland birds such as the wood warbler and the willow warbler. So here I am at Speen Bridge. It is amazing to wake up in the middle of the Highlands. Anyway, got my bag and I am off to a map reference to find a waterfall. Well, I'm deep into the forest already. Now this is what I understand is called temperate rainforest, sometimes known as Atlantic rainforest, and I assume that's because there's just a lot of rain around. And I'm crossing a wonderful stone bridge up to what is already an amazing waterfall, where I am told I'm going to meet the site manager, Steve. Got to find him. Bit of background before we actually meet the man in charge of all of this. There is quite a lot of legend surrounding this forest. According to that, there is buried treasure. There's a chest in the wood containing gold brought from France to support the Jacobite rebellion of 1745. It's thought to have been destined for Bonnie Prince Charlie, which is Charles Edward Stuart, whose allies reputedly hid in the woods, but he fled before the gold reached him. And gold coins found in the forest back in 1850, supposedly, is the evidence for this story. I don't think I'm going to find any gold coins today, but I am going to take some photos of this amazing waterfall. I mean, it properly is stunning. Properly stunning. Anyway, I'm going to find out more about that when I meet Steve, who said he'd be by the waterfall, but, well, he's not. They said you can walk for days and never meet anyone. I hope we're not going to start that way. Steve? Ah! Steve, I thought you'd gone. Hi, I'm Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Hi.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. You're the site manager.
I am the site manager, yeah.
Right. So tell me a bit about what makes this forest special. What is different about this place?
Loch Arkaig Pine Forest is very special. It's an ancient Caledonian pine forest, so it's a lineage going right back to just after the last ice age. But more recently, the Forest Commission acquired the site in 1966. They planted it with non-native species, which was the policy at the time. So a lot of species from North America, Sitka spruce and lodgepole pine. And about 20 years later, they had a kind of reversal of policy. They realised that the remnants of Caledonian pine forest were really, really special, and they shouldn't really have planted them. So they started the restoration process in the 1990s, which involved basically chopping down the young trees that they'd planted. And we picked up that challenge to complete the restoration.
But, I mean, what got you involved in the first place? Were you climbing trees as a boy? Have you always been a country sort of lad, or how did you get involved in such a thing?
Very much a country boy at heart. Brought up on a farm in Herefordshire, and we were surrounded by woodland. We had woods on the farm that we used to make fence posts and things, but I spent an awful lot of time walking with my dog in woods, and I was fascinated by woods and trees, which eventually led to a career in that direction.
I know you told me how important this is ecologically and what you're trying to do as an estate, but what does it mean to you personally, living and working and walking in these woods?
It's an absolute joy and a privilege to be here and to be, call that my job. It is amazing. I absolutely love it.
There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of people around here. Are there, and I've just not seen them, or is it fairly sparsely populated?
It is very sparsely populated, which is one of the attractions for me. But we do get small numbers of regular visitors. So it's unusual for me to come to the forest and not meet a visitor. But ones and twos. It's not dozens and dozens. One of the really major issues with this whole project is the access. So we need to change it from the non-native trees, which we'll go in the forest and see. They're big, they're mature trees, timber trees. They need to come out, and they need to come out on the back of a wagon, a timber truck. So to do that, we need to upgrade a significant bridge that the commandos built during the Second World War, because this was the base of the commandos. They did all their training around here. They built a bridge, but that's not strong enough to take the timber trucks, so we need to upgrade that bridge. And that's going to cost an awful lot of money. That's best part of £500,000 for that one bridge. But we are going to do that as sensitively as we can.
And you think in the end, although it's brutal, hard architecture, in the end that helps the green world? Absolutely.
We will mitigate that. We will have the minimal impact that we possibly can, and that in 2 years' time it will green back up, and I will determined that I will be very proud of the way we've built that road, that will look sensitive in the landscape, and hand on heart, that is going to happen.
Brilliant. Well, look, I'm going to stop here and take a couple of tourist photos of the waterfall, if that's all right.
No problem.
Well, no doubt you can hear the waterfall in the background. It's not a huge waterfall, but it is very, very loud, and it is beautiful. But I'm also taking the chance here for a little bit of a break, because before we head into the forest proper, I want to meet a guy called Lewis Pate. He is the local raptor expert, and in particular, he's been looking after a very well-known couple of ospreys who have nested here. There's an actual osprey cam, a live osprey cam, which lots of people around the world have been looking at what's going on there. There's a real drama with these birds. The two chicks, I think, were hatched in around April 2019. Previous chicks were actually taken by a pine marten, but there's a lot of hope that these chicks will actually have a better chance. If you want to have a look at that webcam, if you can't make it all the way up here, it's definitely worthwhile. Just put into your search engine the Loch Arkaig Ospreys. Arkaig, A-R-K-A-I-G. That's a Woodland Trust camera. Anyway, I'm going to try and meet him, and he is, well, not about 20-minute walk from here, I think. So, gotta go. All right.
How you doing?
Hi.
Good.
Hi.
Dog.
No, they're lovely. Hi, Lewis. You must be the raptor man. Just explain to me where we are.
We're just walking along the track at the side of Loch Arkaig towards the community forest school.
Right. And you very kindly have given me perhaps the ugliest bit of headwear. Hello. The ugliest bit of headwear I've ever seen. People warned me about midges, but I've only been out 5 minutes and I've been bitten all over the place already.
Yeah, they're an interesting component of our of our of our ecosystem in Scotland. It's one of the things that keeps Scotland reasonably people free for most of the year, and they're quite difficult. Yeah.
And so this is a sort of, it's like a bee's nest, isn't it? A beekeeper's hat that I'm wearing to try and to keep them off. These effective, are they?
Work very effectively. Yeah.
Now, your speciality is not trees and woodlands. It's raptors, isn't it?
Yeah, I work. I work in several different projects around breeding raptors in Scotland. So golden eagles, white-tailed eagles, ospreys, barn owls, buzzards, and we do quite a lot of work on these various species for various reasons.
And tell me about the project you've been doing here then.
Well, we're very fortunate at Loch Arkaig to have access to several resident pairs of breeding ospreys. 3 years ago, we built the platform. It's in a Scots pine up on the hill in the middle of nowhere. And we, a series of climbers, brought in a power source, which is several solar panels, battery packs, and we managed to capture this breeding pair of ospreys and put the signal out onto the internet to the viewing public, which is fantastic.
And how popular has that been, that feed from the osprey's nest?
It's been phenomenal. I mean, we couldn't have imagined the reach that it has. And there were over 200,000 hits on the Woodland Trust website in the first 3 months of that camera being established. Now, the ospreys they bred in their first year, astonishingly, because they were so bad. They were young, inexperienced birds, and they managed to get a chick away. Lachlan, I think they named him in the end, and we colour ringed him and he fledged, and hopefully he'll come back and we'll pick him up again. Second year, last year, they had a clutch of 3 eggs, and just before they were due to hatch, a pine marten got onto the nest and took all the eggs away. And this year we've got a clutch of 2, a brood of 2. They're doing reasonably well despite the horrible cold spring we've had.
So we've just come up to the Clunes Forest School, which is really just a hut on the edge of this forest, but this is where we can see the feed itself.
Yes, and we can go and have a look at that now.
Are there midges inside?
No.
Let's go inside, shall we? Let's go inside. Just explain to me what we're seeing here.
Well, nothing says I love you quite like a headless fish first thing in the morning. The male will bring fish in, usually decapitated, and present it on the nest for the female then to, I don't know what species of fish it is. These birds will fish beyond Loch Arkaig, so they are fishing in marine environment as well. They're not just fishing in fresh water, so we get different species. They bring in quite a lot of trout to this nest, which I'd imagine they'll take from Loch Arkaig. I think that's a trout. But by the time they get it into the nest, sometimes it's not quite so easy to tell.
And how many fish will they need to bring back to the nest for these 2 birds?
I mean, it's pretty constant, and the mother and father have to feed themselves as well. So they're feeding themselves off the nest. Not everything's brought into the nest. You can see she's consuming some of that herself, not feeding it to the chicks. So at this stage, you might find 4 or 5 fish coming into the nest each day. In another 2 or 3 weeks, that could double, that could treble. So it's a pretty constant requirement, that process.
And ospreys are just one bird. You've got lots of other activity around here.
Yeah, we've got 1,000 hectares of pine forest, mixed pine forest, which has a resident breeding pair of white-tailed sea eagles. So we know the lineage of that female. She's hatched on Mull back in 2003, and she's now paired up with a young male, or a sub-adult male, and they've failed to breed for the last 2 years. We've been into their nest and fitted a camera to it in a hope of picking up where that male's come from. But they'll get back on track, and in the next few years hopefully produce young. But we've also got tree nesting golden eagles, which is very rare on the west of Scotland. But we've got barn owls and buzzards and no goshawks as far as we know, sparrowhawks. We've got quite a mix of raptors on site, so it's encouraging. And I think as the habitats changed and improved when the Woodland Trust restructured the site, that can only help to benefit the birds.
Well, I can see we're making good work of that fish, about half done. And if people want to have a look at this live cam, it's available on the Woodland Trust website.
If anybody just goes on to Google and Googles Loch Arkaig Ospreys or Loch Arkaig Osprey camera, it will come up as a YouTube feed, and it's widely accessible.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Real treat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So, oh look, I'm just about to step on a frog. Now you're taking me deep into the woods here. Just explain to me about the landscape around us.
Okay, well, it's quite an open landscape. The forest itself is enclosed in a fence, so that we can manage the deer numbers at a lower density than outside, because trees will not regenerate. You can see just as we're passing this trees here, this is heavily browsed by deer.
Right.
So we want to remove the non-native trees, which creates a gap in the forest, and then we want to use the native trees as a seed source to naturally generate into those gaps. Right. The woodland is ancient, but some of the trees are quite young.
Right.
So
when you say quite young, how old are these trees?
These trees are about 45 years old.
Right. And the older ones would be how old then?
They're between 250 and 350 years old.
Right. And the trees that we can see in front of us, what sort of trees are they?
So there's a mixture. The majority of them that you can see with the kind of pointy tops are Sitka spruce. So that's a non-native tree from North America. That's the plantation species. But also there are old Caledonian pines that you see in front of us. Right. There's a dead one next to a live one. Now the dead one was burnt in a fire in 1942.
Now is this the famous fire with the commandos?
The commandos accidentally set fire to the entire forest.
Right, let's walk and you can tell me the story about the commandos and why they're important. This is commandos during World War II had a secret base around here, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. The castle at Nacarry was requisitioned by the government, and that was where the training for the commandos all took place.
And then how did they accidentally burn down the whole forest?
Well, there are different accounts, because they were using live firing, live ammunition and pyrotechnics and the likes, and a lot of people think that's why the fire started. But the chief of the Clan Camerons told me, I was in his castle, we were looking out the window, and he said the commandos were abseiling down a cliff, and it was May 1942, very, very dry conditions, and somebody dropped a cigarette, and the whole place went up.
And when you say the whole place went up, I mean, how much of the forest did you lose?
3,000 acres burnt over 4 days.
From one cigarette, we think?
That's the story I've been told. There are no official accounts.
And how long has it taken to regenerate? Well, we're sort of back there now, I suppose.
Well, the evidence of the fire is all around us in the forest. So it's had a huge impact. But fire is actually a naturally occurring event in these old pine forests. It's just the frequency of those fires is sort of more than 200 years. So we forget, because we weren't around long enough to see the fire come around again. So the forest is designed to cope with fire, and actually it can facilitate regeneration.
We're just coming up to a big metal gate which we've got to get round to get into the forest proper. Before we do that, perhaps you can explain something to me, because I'm confused about the importance of what you're doing, because you and others have talked about how important it is to return this to native species, to going to huge amounts of effort to get out the sort of the trees which aren't native to this area. I can understand from an academic point of view why it's nice to have a purely native set of trees, but why is it worth all this bother? Why is it right for nature? Why is it right for the people just to have native trees here?
Well, native woodlands intrinsically have lots of biodiverse value, as you've mentioned. But here, the special nature of these Caledonian pine forests is they are the remnants of the old forest that covered huge areas of the highlands, and they've shrunk and shrunk and shrunk over centuries. Some of which is climatic. 5,000 years ago, the climate was much wetter, and a lot of peat formation from that time. So it isn't natural to have forest all over these hills, but we need a lot more. And where the remnants still exist, we are talking about a genetic lineage going back to the last ice age. So these are the most important, in my view, the most important places to retain the native forests. To me, it's the blueprint of what we're trying to achieve here. So when we take away those bits, the non-native trees, we get this flush of regeneration and this exuberant growth that comes in that follows that. And that's my job, is to turn it around, just flip it, change it from one thing to another and give it an opportunity to decide for itself what it wants to be.
One of the most beautiful parts of the country, you think?
It's remarkable. It's stunning. I just love it.
I have to say, although I know we're mainly talking about trees, one of the most striking things I see is this moss around everything. It looks like a set from Lord of the Rings, you know, the Hobbits. I mean, that I think that's one of the most beautiful things I've seen here.
It's the assemblage of bryophytes that we have, the mosses in particular, that on a wet day like we have today, the greens, like how many shades of green are we looking at there? About 20.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable, and you know, there are multitude varieties of species.
So we're not just blindly wandering through these woods, we're off to meet some people. Who?
We're off to meet a couple of guys. They're contractors that are working in the wood, but they're also members of the local community. So there's Gary Servants, the main driving force behind the community buyout, and his brother-in-law Stuart, and they're in the forest starting to catalogue the trees actually. So we're measuring the trees and working out the densities and the heights so that we can over time see how the forest changes.
Wow. And how long will it till we get to them?
So we've got another 10 minutes of walking through the forest, and then we'll meet up with them.
Is that Woodland Trust pace walking or London out of fit old man walking?
Yeah, okay, we've got half an hour.
Yeah, okay, see you then. Okay, we're going to have to pause just so I have a breath to talk. So we've come into a bit of a clearing, and just ahead on our left I can actually see a hide.
We've walked through a plantation area, and you know how tall the trees were and how dark and dense the forest was, and we've walked out into this open area here where essentially all of the trees are native trees.
The ones around us, how old are they?
So the ones, well, this one to my left here, you can actually establish the age of that tree by counting the whorls of branches. So if you look, they're in groups. If you look at that bottom section of branches, then you come up about half a metre, you see another set of branches, and another, and another, and another. So if you count in between those, you'll find that is between 30 and 40 years old.
So how many years between a level of branches is it?
Just the 1 year. So each year, if you look at the top of the tree, you can see there's a spurt of growth that goes up each year, and buds go up and send out side branches, and then it stops, and that whole process starts again each year.
And is that just true for Scots pine?
It's true for most conifer species, but it's most obvious in Scots pine. It's not always obvious in other conifer species.
That's a fantastic hack. So when I'm wandering through the woods with my family, I can knowledgeably look at a tree and tell them how old it is, and I'll probably actually be right.
If it's a Scots pine, and what I would do is, if you see there's no branches on the bottom of that tree, so I would estimate it's taken about 6 or 7 years to get to that point at which the branches start. So the bottom branches have actually died and fallen away from the tree. So give it between 5 and 6 years, and you start at the next level of branches, and then count your way up.
You have made me sound much cleverer to my children than anything else before. That is brilliant. We took our midge nets off our head so I could speak, but they're going up my nose and in my mouth, so I'm going to have to put it back on. Okay. All right. Okay, well, Gary and Stuart have very kindly invited me up into their hide. The rest of the team are having to stand downstairs. I feel like surveying all the land around us. What brought you here?
Over 20 years. We've always, with my parents, we always came up here on holiday, and so we've known the area. And I've got a business involved in outdoor activities, so it works well with the forestry, sort of in the winter and doing that in the summer, really. So.
And were you born and bred here, or you also came live here?
No, I've been here since 2003 as well. Again, I used to come up here on holidays as a kid, but I've been here since 2003. Since then.
When both of you then, clearly make decisions to move here. There was something that brought you here. Yeah, well, what is it? What is special enough to make you move, you and your family, and make a life here?
Yeah, I guess it was the hills and the mountains and the forests really that brought us here. Plenty of opportunities as well for work, but yeah, it was the landscape and the free outdoor access and all that sort of stuff. Water sports, particularly, all those things. Yep.
And is there something special about this forest to you and the local community?
The forest is very remote. We're in the least remote part of it here, probably the most accessible bit. But yeah, there's another 500 hectares over the hill there that you can only get to by boat. So
I'm amazed you say this is the least remote. I thought you went, this is the most remote. No, okay. So there's a lot more remote places than this. How much of it have you explored?
Yeah, I guess I've been wandering through these woods for about 10 years now, on and off. Pretty much all of this 1,000 hectares, I guess. But even so, you find new bits every time you come out, new things. This corner of the wood's particularly special because there's a nice mixture of the veteran trees and lots of young trees. You can see the young pine coming through, 20, 30-year-old trees. So there's a real nice mixture of stuff, and you can see right up the glen into the old forest.
Well, thank you very much. That's really nice. There's the not insignificant problem of getting down. Anyway, here's goes. Okay. So, why have we stopped at this tree?
We've stopped at this specific tree because it's a great example of the process of regeneration of Scots pine in these western pine woods in particular. So if I can just describe the tree to you, there's actually a horizontal dead tree lying on the ground that you can see. In the process of falling over, it's torn this massive root plate out. You can see the hole in the ground that got torn up. The tree, this is a separate tree. The one that's growing vertically above us, it's a completely separate tree. The seed fell onto the root plate, right, and germinated there and then grew away. And this is a really important process in western pine woods.
And a lovely story because it was a new tree from a dead one.
Absolutely. It's I nearly broke into a Disney song, the circle of life.
Please feel free. This is a safe place for you to get in touch with your inner Disney.
Yeah.
We'll say there may be a pub later. I'll try and take you back to that place. Anyway, a lovely tree. Thank you very much. Well, we're in the Woodland Trust's only boat. Here we go. Right, we're heading off across the loch. I'm not entirely sure where we're going, but I think we're heading for some woodland which is inaccessible by land. Sorry, I'm laughing because I'm just going to have to grab onto the boat so I don't fall off. If you hear a splash, you know I've been unsuccessful.
My name is Jessica Maxwell, and I'm the Project Development Manager here at Loch Arkaig Pine Forest.
Okay. I was going to say we've travelled quite a bit down the loch, but the loch goes on forever. But we are quite a bit far down. Now, you've taken me to this part of the forest for a special reason. I mean, you can't get here by car at all. This is quite remote.
It really is. So the only way to get here is by boat or on foot, I suppose. It's quite rough ground, quite difficult to get to.
And what's so different then about this part of the forest?
Right, so as you can see ahead of us here along the shoreline is this beautiful ancient Caledonian pine forest. So we've got different ages of trees here. Scots pine, we have some lovely oak and birch, but it has also been ploughed and planted. So it was ploughed and planted back in the 70s, and some restoration work was done in the 90s. But there is a sea of lodgepole pine in front of us that needs to come out in order.
And what is wrong with the lodgepole pine?
So it's a non-native species to this area, and it will outcompete native trees.
Right.
You've probably walked around in some of these non-native plantations today, and they tend to exclude all the amazing ground flora and other species from existing in the area. So they tend to kind of block the sunlight and not allow for other species to exist in the area. So that creates a kind of monoculture, if you will, and doesn't allow for that diversity to flourish.
And how hopeful are you of actually having a dramatic impact on this landscape?
Very hopeful, and I think it helps to see that it's possible behind us. So those trees are only 30 years old, and there's great forest structure. There's the old granny pines, there's these 30-year-old trees that have come back, this flush of regeneration.
How long will it take to actually get this landscape back to what you think it should be?
That's quite a contentious question, actually, because even that term restore is quite loaded. Restore to what? I think of this project as being like a 200-year project, but when do you ever kind of draw a line and say that we're done? So it will take time.
And 200 years, that's stage one, and then we'll come back and talk about what next to do.
That's right.
Okay. Well, it's been a fantastic day. I feel the weather is changing. Are there such things as pubs near here?
Indeed.
There are. Well, that may well be our next stop. Thank you very much. It's been a real treat for me to be introduced to all of this. Thank you, and thank you for letting me on the Woodland Trust's only boat. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Woodland Trust podcast, Woodland Walks with Adam Shaw. Join us next month when Adam will be taking another woodland walk in the company of Woodland Trust staff and volunteers. Don't forget to subscribe to this series on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast, and do give us a rating and a review. And why not send in your own recording of your favourite woodland walk to be included in a future podcast? Do keep it to a maximum of 5 minutes, and please tell us what makes your woodland walk special. Alternatively, just send us an email with your thoughts about favourite walks you've been on and what makes them special for you. You can send your email thoughts and any audio files to podcast@woodlandtrust.org.uk. We look forward to hearing from you.